The majority of beginning of life issues center around the idea of humans having a right to life, and when this life is considered to begin. Many of these issues relate to the moral permissibility of termination of pregnancies, and whether the embryo or fetus has the same right to life as a fully formed being. We should first consider what gives us a right to life. In answering this, we may say that we have a right to life because others have a right to life. We award this to other humans as equals, separate from animals, as we consider ourselves to be significantly more worthy. This could be because of our roles as contributors to society, as a necessity for our progress as a species. It could also be that our desire for self-preservation makes us empathize with similar beings, and therefore impart the same rights we desire for ourselves onto others. We can infer from this that it is the fact that we are human that we consider ourselves worthy of a right to life. So what does it mean to be human? We can consider two criteria of humanity in relationship to this question: things which our humanity cannot exist without, and things which make us unique as a species. In the first category, we can consider having a physical form as being essential to our humanity. Just as sound requires air to travel, physical form is required as a medium of expressing our non-physical traits. If we are unable to express what gives us our humanity, how can we use this to define ourselves as human? Another thing our humanity relies on is our conscious mind and our ability to comprehend our own existence. Without an awareness of our own state, we would not be in a position to question what makes us human in the first place. Another aspect of what makes us human comes from our relationships with other humans. We have uniquely developed characteristics which allow us to function cooperatively, such as empathy and our ability to consider the morality of actions, and to make decisions not based off of instinct or desire, but what we believe to be right. While compassion and capability of making complex moral decisions can be observed in other animals, they are used uniquely by humans as an integral part of complex relationships we form with other humans. Through our development of communication and reasoning, as a species we have developed the most complex and widespread functional society on Earth. Rather than considering what we are without society, however, it is more insightful to consider what society is without us. Our society is a product of emergence, having come into existence from our interactions and creations as humans, and emerging as something greater than the sum of its parts. Many aspects of a society can be replaced without disrupting its function. For an example, infrastructure, systems of government, or the people in positions of power. Society still exists when we replace any part, except for us. If we were to replace humanity with a different species, our society would not function. As humans, we possess a unique ability to operate as functional individuals in the most complex society observed as of yet. From the criteria explored, we see an idea of physicality being an element of our humanity, as well as having some form of sense and understanding of the world. We can also see that with a higher cognitive function, we have developed a unique ability to apply traits such as empathy and morality, to develop important relationships with other humans, and to act in a rational manner. Now that we have roughly defined what it means to be human, we can start exploring when we consider human life to begin. It is impossible to define this scientifically, as there are many different milestones in the development of a physical human. An attempt to define a human based on pure science would create an arbitrary ruling of what makes us human, which would make us ourselves arbitrary. Defining a fetus as a human and an embryo as a non-human, for example, creates a scientific definition that without all structures of a human being fully present, a human cannot exist. This distinction fails to include individuals who may have slight to severe birth defects affecting their physical form, who have been born and progressed into adulthood. An arbitrary rule would have us not consider them as worthy of life. If we attempt to define when humanity begins based on the traits which we consider to make us unique, we would then encounter a similar issue. Many people, whether it is due to their upbringing or unfortunate illnesses, do not experience feelings of empathy or lack the mental ability to act in a rational way. We would still consider these people as human, however. Consciousness is arguably one of the most important features we consider when giving people a right to life. For example, patients who are in a brain-dead state lose their right to autonomy, and the right for them to continue their current state of existence is decided by those close to them. So how would we define the beginning of consciousness then? We can define different levels of consciousness in the early stages of physical existence of a human. A fetus, for example, is aware of its environment and can react to external stimuli, but it does not consciously experience anything, as it is more accurately in a state of unconsciousness. A newborn infant has a more developed consciousness. They can experience emotion and have a comprehension of self and non-self touch, but again, are present-oriented and incapable of a complex understanding of self. The human consciousness is something that develops through the early stages of life, through the input of external stimuli. So, should we consider only a brain with a fully developed consciousness, capable of memory and understanding language, as human? Ethicists such as Peter Singer argue exactly that our position on killing humans is unrelated to the wrongness of the action, but instead is dependent on characteristics such as autonomy and consciousness. He argues that infants can be killed without equating it to killing a human, as the traits of the human are what give them their right to life, rather than their rights being dependent on their species. An article by Francesca Minerva and Alberto Giugolini claim that a newborn infant and a fetus are morally equivalent, and neither can be considered a person by moral definition. In contrast, there are people who view humanity as something intrinsic. To become human means the being has qualities to become human, and therefore already possesses humanity. An example of this view can be found in Francis Beckwith's book, Defending Life, a moral and legal case against abortion choice, where he states that as we exist now with our own intrinsic value, at every moment in our past we have possessed the same intrinsic value. Both these arguments concern how we view humanity and human nature. While infants don't possess many of the traits we deemed essential for humans, they do possess the potential to develop them. So, would something possess humanity only when it is capable of portraying the associated traits? Or is humanity intrinsic to beings who can develop those traits? Looking back at our definition of humanity, we can't find a clear answer. If given the time and care required for growth, all beings with this potential will become clearly human. By viewing humanity as an intrinsic trait, we award a right to life to a being at the moment of their conception. If we choose to view humanity as a quality that is developed by beings, we then must find a clear definition of when we consider humanity to be obtained. A way we could define this would be using our earlier definition of what we consider to be human. It could therefore be argued that, until a child is capable of basic empathy and morality, it should not be awarded a right to life. In conclusion, it is important to consider what gives us a right to life, in order to allow us to explore when our right to life begins. A definition of the beginning of human life is required to determine the moral status of beings at different stages of life, and whether we consider early stages of life as having the same rights to us. If we are to view humanity as intrinsic, then from the moment of conception, a being would be considered human. If humanity is something developed, however, we cannot consider early stages of being as human. This is a heavily debated topic in moral philosophy and extends far beyond this focused summary, however. Thank you for listening.